the NBA right now has a load management problem. Only 5 All-Star players missed 5 games or less this
I
season.
love talking about
And
this.
OG, you have been watching the game for a very long time. You've watched it when players took a lot of pride in playing every single game in the regular season.
Mhm.
There's been a lot of theories as to why this is still a problem. While players are playing less than ever but getting hurt more than ever,
Mhm.
what do you think it is? Why do you think right now this is such a tough issue to gauge right now?
I think that it's largely due to both sides being culpable. So the owners do hold out guys because they do have to protect their commodities. So a guy like Anthony Davis, like I told you before, he goes 35 and 15 one night and he's a healthy scratch the next night. Well, if he plays the next night and he's got a history of being hurt and he ends up getting hurt the next night and he's out for 10 more games, that's bad for business. That's terrible for business. However, when you got a guy who is healthy or is hurt, he's not injured. I mean, he's not injured, he's hurt. And he can actually go, but he won't go because he's trying to protect himself. I think those two things are completely different. Back when guys played 80, 82 games, the reason why that was important was because that was all they had. The game was all Mitch Richmond had. The game was all Joe Dumars had. There was no social media. There weren't many guys getting shoe commercials and mass endorsements and things like that. My game is my reputation. So if I'm showing up regularly, this is what you're judging me on. You judging me on my game. Now you got these guys in and out of the lineup. What they have at stake is more than just their game. It's not just their game. It's more of their social media accounts, their shoe deals. And me getting hurt, that stuff might go away. So I got to protect that. I got to protect me to protect that stuff more than anything.
To me, it's not a huge deal for the fact that ratings are up 1% from last year. Yes, it is unfortunate that we see our players sit, the star players sit, because night to night, I want to turn on a game and I don't want to have to worry about going to check the injury report and seeing whether or not LeBron or AD or D'Lo, for just because, of course, I'm just talking about the Lakers, are going to play or not. So, yes, that aspect of it does suck. I want to see the star players play on a night-to-night basis. But really, when it comes to ensuring that these guys are ready for playoff times, because that's when ratings are at their best. Come playoff time, it's a long season. Similar with the MLB, it's a 162 game season. There are going to be players that take off to ensure that they're primed for playoff time, and that's why you have players like LeBron who in the past have vocalized being in support of a shortened season because they want to ensure that their bodies are as healthy as possible for playoff time when NBA wants their players on the court the most, that they're there. So for me, it's not a huge deal. I understand if you're fans, it's unfortunate, but regardless, it doesn't seem to be bothering fans since ratings are up from last year.
Right.
The cause for concern is that, yes, these players are becoming injured on a little bit more frequent of a rate, but it's because the game's evolving. It's a faster game. It's a more physical, let me not say more physical, but a lot more is involved in terms of jumping, play to play, the lateral movements, the dribbling. It's a lot more on the legs, a lot more on the knees, a lot more on the soft tissue. So that's another reason. That's another thing to take into account. But these guys are so athletic that they put a lot on their bodies. So time to time, they might have to take a game. I understand as a fan that might upset you, but these guys get paid millions and millions of dollars to put on a show for you guys. And you want them to be able to put that show on when it matters most come playoff time.
Prime example would be tonight. I mean, I want to see Joker and Giannis go at it tonight. That's very important. I don't want to hear that Giannis is a healthy scratch for tonight. I want to make sure that Joker and Giannis are going tonight. I'm going to watch that game.
And to further go on off that is LeBron and KD have not played against each other since 2018.
Yeah, 5 years.
LeBron was a Cavalier.
I was going to say LeBron was a Cavalier. Blake Griffin was top 10 in. I think they did. Was that the Christmas Day matchup? I think
it might have been, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Then Ben Simmons was obviously All NBA player at that time.
Mm-hmm.
You had Blake Griffin top 10 in points. So that's just how different the league was. But that was the last time we saw two of the best players we've seen this game have match up against one another.
Oh, they did play. It was 2018 Christmas Day. So LeBron was a Laker.
No, LeBron was on the Cavs when
2018 Christmas, we mean 2018-19 season. So 2018-19 was LeBron's first year as Lakers.
You're right.
I think
That's
this
when he got hurt on Christmas.
Yep.
He got hurt that game.
Oh, right.
Yes,
that was where he had the groin
and Lonzo
injury,
got hurt
right?
too. That's when the season went downhill.
That was when shit hit the fan. I love this topic because nowadays a lot of the top players, like Kevin Durant's 34, LeBron's 38, they're playing longer than ever before. They're more durable, and part of that is that they have to sit out sometimes to manage their body for the playoffs. Because hey, look, for as much as I would love to see Giannis Embiid and Jokic play tonight, I'd much rather those guys play every game in the playoffs at a high enough level.
Agreed.
And because of how perimeter-oriented the game is today, for those centers specifically, like Anthony Davis, who have to guard more in space, the game is faster, it can wear you down more and more in the fourth quarter, and the fatigue can add up over time. But one article that I loved reading was in 2018, titled "These Kids Are Ticking Time Bombs." And it's an article about how athletes today, a lot of the time, they specialize in one sport, and especially with young hoopers that are so good at basketball. It's like, okay, I can play Division I basketball. I'm 6'5". I'm going to be tall. I can maybe make it to a professional level. A lot of the time, they specialize in just basketball itself. And the overuse of playing basketball all day, every day for 5 to 10 to 15 years, by the time these athletes get to the NBA at their size, some have different frames than others. Some biomechanically may not just be naturally durable, but others, I feel like the repeated overuse that can lead to some of these stress injuries, like a Cade Cunningham with his shin, or in Julius Randle's NBA debut as a Laker fan, 5 minutes in, he breaks his leg on a routine play because the repeated overuse, the repeated wear and tear, that can get to a player when you're just training the same muscle groups over and over again without much rest. And I think that plays a role in load management, maybe not working to the extent people would hope.
I think that's a good point. The overloading of players' bodies at a young age is a fascinating argument. The only pushback I give to it is that now we can measure these players and how much they play. They play AAU, they're playing high school basketball, they're playing in college. We can measure it. But before the AAU was prevalent, I'm sure people that love playing basketball were playing at the park probably just as much. You know, people were playing all day long on concrete
a lot
floors.
more physical, no doubt.
And so there's just no way to measure the differences in that. And I feel like definitely in older generations, people were playing all day long, just not in an AAU format, just not in games.
Sure.
Tim Grover made an excellent point, who was Michael Jordan's trainer, famous for that.
Legend.
Yes. He said that players now don't weight train enough. They use a lot of resistance bands, and he argues that players have to build up strength to those muscles to withstand the forceful landings that they have.
I agree with that.
And he was one of those guys that, like, resistant bands are cool and stuff, but you actually have to weight train and build up those muscles to handle these landings. And he feels like that now is getting lost within the NBA. But Paul George was even talking about on his podcast that these training staffs are coming to them and telling them that to sit out certain games because of chance of re-injury. And maybe I'm thinking that maybe science has played too big of a part in this, where there's so much worry of re-injury that you might actually be doing the opposite effect and telling them to sit out.
Only pushback I give you there is they said, Kevin Durant, don't play. You have a high chance of injuring yourself. Don't play. It's the NBA Finals.
Game 5.
100%. I 100% understand Kevin Durant wanted to go out there and try and give his team the opportunity to win. Then, of course, worst case scenario happens. He tears his Achilles. He's out for the entire next season. It was these trainers coming to him and telling him, giving him that warning, hey, you have a chance of re-injuring. Let's not give it a go.
Had that been the regular season, had he done that in January, he'd have probably been out for at least past the All-Star break.
Absolutely agree.
At least past the All-Star break, he would have been out. There would have been no reason for him to get back into the lineup until then. Plus, you got guys like KD, you got guys like James, who even Kawhi Leonard, who, because they've been so brilliant in stretches, we mask the fact that they've been breaking down for years. So KD started breaking down after the 18-19 season, right? So he starts breaking down. Same logic with James. James started breaking down originally in the 18-19 season. That it actually started further back to like around 15, 16. He started to have these knick-knack injuries, and the beginning of the end of him looked like it was coming, right? Kawhi Leonard, when he had the degenerative knee issue, he started to break down. But I thought that San Antonio, I thought that Toronto, I thought they did a good job in managing him. The same thing with the Clippers, where they brought him along slowly. Now, when you're talking about load managing, there's a difference between bringing a guy along slowly to prevent injury as opposed to just holding guys out. I think that those two things are not the same.
100%.
Yeah. I think the most frustrating part of this is there's a solution. It just will never happen, and that's to play less games, right? I think it's very easy if, one of the biggest reasons where you compare something like, why doesn't the NFL have this? It's like, well, they play 17 games, and every game is extremely important, and you can't go out there and just sit a game because you want to sit or you're banged up. Like, even in the NFL, you were playing through injuries, whether it's during practice throughout the week or on game day come Sundays. And for the NBA, it's just, we know once these owners and the Players Association go and they go to collective bargaining, they do the CBA, neither side is going to, even though the players might want it, because say you go in there and say, we want to have less games. You have less games, you have less revenue, which means less money is going to the players and the contracts aren't going to be as
not doing that.
So the players side of things, their money would come down. On the owner side of things, their money would come down. So it seems like there would be a solution to play less games. And I know Adam Silver's had these, ideas of doing a midseason tournament in the hopes that players would play more of those games with an incentive. But I still think that's not going to do what the NBA thinks it will, because winning a tournament, while $1 million is big for the 11th man on the bench, for the guy that is leading this team who's making $35 million, it probably doesn't have that big of an impact.
Are we sure that the NBA would lose money by shortening the season?
Yeah, you just would have less tickets to sell.
It's the ticket revenue. That's
yes, absolutely.
Less games to advertise.
Because the money, remember, the money isn't at the gate. I think the majority of the NBA teams, I think they make about 35% at the gate. The money is in TV and advertising. That's where the money is. So if I got less games on TV, that means I got less advertising. And if advertising is down and the TV is down, that means the revenue is down. So I don't want to do that. Absolutely not. No.
But with football, if it were 20 games, then maybe the games would matter less and the fan interest would shrink.
They just
feel
upped the games though from 16 to
1
17.
game, sure.
And I was
there's
not
still
a fan
ton of
that
pushback.
And it
on
used to be
that.
12.
Yeah.
I just feel like if the NBA were to shorten the season and you make it matter more, there aren't divisions. So like a Titan Jaguar game matters in December, and the NBA, no one cares about most teams that aren't in the playoff position, but they've added the playing tournament. They're thinking about adding in the midseason tournament to draw fan interest. I think the blind spot here is the back-to-backs, and with how much more the game is on the perimeter, there's a little bit more fatigue to some of these bigger players, but also I think nowadays more than ever, partially because of AAU, you brought up the point players playing on concrete maybe offsets the overuse in AAU nowadays. I still feel like because of, like when I played AAU, I was an average high school player. I would play 4 games in a weekend. So for a lot of these highly touted top 10 recruits that are traveling more and more in cars, like a lot of them are not getting these plane tickets. They're driving from Alabama to Washington, D.C. for a tournament and whatnot. And over time, by the time it gets to the league, I think that can play a pretty big role. And the other thing too is because of there still being 82 games, it's just another, I guess, roadblock to staying healthy long term. And that's why there's a lot of stars, I think, having those low management games. And that, as fans, we don't want to see that. But we have to acknowledge the travel as well for AAU, combined with it still being 82 games. Maybe if we lowered it to 72, the way it was the last couple of years with an in-season tournament, the revenue could go up because on television, those ratings would improve more if those games actually have more meaning in December, in January, and especially in February once the Super Bowl is over.
I just think, unfortunately, that you see leagues extend the games because it's going to bring them more money. The NBA is not going to lose millions upon millions of dollars because that in turn is going to lower player salaries, and they're not going to want that either. And the only solution really is to have younger players stop playing as much games, but there's so much money in AAU as well and so much exposure that that's not going to happen either.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Limiting the back-to-backs would be helpful, but I feel like there's still you're still trying to do that. Like you're playing right now from October. If you make the finals to June, there's not much more you could extend this season until it's a 12-month year. So even though they've been limiting the back-to-backs, there's only so much you could do.